Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. William Ford adjusted his tie one last time before stepping out of his black Mercedes G-Wagon. At 38, he had everything a man could want. A thriving construction company that had rebuilt half of downtown Phoenix, a sprawling estate in Scottsdale, and what everyone believed was the perfect marriage to Diana Riggs Ford. His military background in Army Special Forces had taught him discipline and strategic thinking, qualities that had served him well in both business and life. Diana met him at the front door of their mansion, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a designer dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Ready for our weekend getaway, darling?" she asked, her voice carrying that sultry tone that had first attracted him 5 years ago when they met at a charity gala. "More than ready," William replied, though something in her eyes seemed different lately. He'd noticed it over the past few months, fleeting glances at her phone, hushed conversations that ended when he entered the room, sudden interest in weekend trips to places she'd never mentioned before. As they loaded their bags into the car, William's brother, Ryan Hubbard, pulled into the driveway. Ryan, 2 years younger and a detective with the Phoenix PD, had always been protective of William despite being the younger sibling. "Hey, Will, heading to that cabin Diana found?" Ryan asked, his cop instincts always making him slightly suspicious of anything new. "Yeah, someplace up in Flagstaff. Diana says it's supposed to be really secluded and romantic," William answered, noting how Diana had turned away during the conversation. "Just be careful up there, man. Cell service can be spotty in those mountains," Ryan said, giving William a firm handshake. "Call me when you get back." As they drove north toward Flagstaff, Diana seemed unusually nervous, checking her phone constantly and making small talk that felt forced. She'd been the one to suggest this trip, claiming she found the perfect cabin on some rental website. William had been busy with a major project, a new shopping complex that would employ hundreds of people, and had been happy to let her handle the details. "Tell me about this host again," William said as they wound through the mountain roads. "Oh, his name is Vincent Short. He seems really nice." "Very accommodating," Diana replied, her fingers tapping nervously on her phone screen. What William didn't know was that Diana had been planning this weekend for months, but not for the reasons she'd led him to believe. She'd been having an affair with Tony Durham, a smooth-talking con artist she'd met at one of her yoga classes. Tony had convinced her that William's success could be their success if they played their cards right. The plan was simple but ruthless. Get William to the isolated cabin, stage an accident that would leave Diana a very wealthy widow, and disappear with Tony to start a new life somewhere far from Arizona. Diana had been feeding Tony information about William's assets, his life insurance policies, and his routines for months. Vincent Short, the cabin's actual owner, had unknowingly become part of their scheme when Tony had contacted him about renting the property under a false identity. But Vincent was more observant than they'd anticipated. Chapter 2. The Warning. The mountain cabin was exactly as advertised, isolated, beautiful, and surrounded by dense forest. William pulled up to the rustic but well-maintained structure just as the sun was beginning to set behind the peaks. The air was crisp and clean, a welcome change from Phoenix's desert heat. "The host said he'd leave the key under the mat," Diana said, her voice tight with what William assumed was excitement. As William stepped out of the car, he noticed tire tracks in the dirt, recent ones that suggested another vehicle had been there not long ago. His military training had taught him to observe details, and something about the tracks bothered him. They were for a large truck or SUV, and they led not just to the parking area, but around the back of the cabin. "I'll grab the bags," he told Diana, who was already walking toward the front door with unusual urgency. William was pulling their luggage from the trunk when his phone buzzed. "Unknown number. Mr. Ford? This is Vincent Short. I'm the cabin owner." "Oh, hey, Vincent. We just arrived. Thank you for accommodating the last-minute booking." There was a pause on the other end of the line that made William's instincts prickle. "Sir, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Do not go inside that cabin with your wife. I repeat, do not go inside. Call me from your car." The line went dead. William looked up to see Diana waving at him from the front porch, key in hand. "Come on, honey. I can't wait to see inside." Instead of joining her, William walked back to his car and dialed Vincent's number. The man answered on the first ring. "Thank God you called. Sir, I'm sending you a photo right now. Do not react when you see it. Just act normal." William's phone chimed with an incoming message. The photo showed the interior of the cabin's living room, taken from what appeared to be a security camera. The room looked normal except for a small frame on the mantel that was circled in red. William zoomed in on the image, and his blood went cold. The frame contained a wedding photo. Not his wedding photo, but one showing Diana in a wedding dress standing next to Tony Durham, a man William recognized from Diana's yoga studio. The photo was clearly recent, taken sometime in the past few months while Diana was supposedly planning this romantic getaway. "Mr. Ford, are you there?" Vincent's voice was urgent. "I'm here." William managed, his mind racing. "I installed those security cameras after a break-in last month. When I saw your wife arrive with another man yesterday, not you, I got suspicious. They spent hours staging that living room, placing that photo and other items. Then this morning, the man came back with what looked like tools. I've been watching the feeds remotely. Sir, I think you're in danger." William felt a cold fury building in his chest. Yesterday, Diana had told him she was spending the day at a spa with her friend Shannon Harmon. She'd even shown him the spa's website and said her phone would be off during treatments. "Where are you now, Vincent?" "I'm at my main house about 10 miles away. I was supposed to be out of town this weekend. I think they planned it that way. I only came back because I forgot some paperwork." Through the car window, William watched Diana becoming increasingly agitated on the porch. She was gesturing for him to come inside, and he could see her saying something, though he couldn't hear the words. "Vincent, I need you to do something for me. Call the sheriff's department and tell them you suspect something is wrong at your cabin. Tell them you're the owner and you're concerned. Don't mention me yet." "Already on it, sir. I called them before I called you." William ended the call and sat in his car, staring at the photo. His wife of 5 years, the woman he'd trusted, loved, and built a life with, had been planning his murder. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound he'd suffered in combat. But William Ford wasn't the kind of man who crumbled under pressure. He was the kind who got even. Chapter 3. The Discovery. William forced himself to appear calm as he approached the cabin, luggage in hand. Diana's relief was visible as he climbed the porch steps. "I was starting to worry. What took so long?" she asked, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Just had to take a call about the downtown project." "You know how it is," William replied, setting down the bags and embracing her. As he held her, he noticed she was trembling slightly. Fear or anticipation, he couldn't tell which. Inside the cabin, William's trained eye immediately began cataloging details. The living room looked exactly as it had in Vincent's photo, including the wedding picture on the mantel. Diana hadn't noticed him looking at it yet, but when she did, how would she explain it? "This place is perfect," Diana said, moving around the room with nervous energy. "I'm going to open some wine. Why don't you start a fire?" As she disappeared into the kitchen, William approached the mantel. The photo was in a silver frame, and when he examined it closely, he could see that it wasn't just posed. It was professional. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment Vegas wedding. This had been planned. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Back bedroom. Under the bed. V." William told Diana he was going to check out the rest of the cabin and made his way to the back bedroom. Under the bed, exactly as Vincent had indicated, he found a duffel bag. Inside were items that made his blood run cold. Duct tape, plastic sheeting, a change of clothes, and what appeared to be accelerant, the kind used to start fires. There were also documents, life insurance policies in Diana's name, property deeds that had been altered, and most damning of all, a handwritten note in Diana's handwriting that read, "Make it look like an accident. Fire is best. I'll be at Shannon's with alibi." William's military training kicked in. He photographed everything with his phone, then carefully replaced the items exactly as he'd found them. As he stood up, he heard a vehicle approaching outside. Through the bedroom window, he saw a red pickup truck parking behind the cabin, the same tire tracks he'd noticed earlier. A man got out, and even in the fading light, William recognized Tony Durham. "Diana," he called out, returning to the living room. "I think someone's here." Diana's face went white. "What? No, that's impossible. This place is completely isolated." There was a knock at the back door. Diana looked panicked, but William gave her a reassuring smile. "I'll handle it." He opened the back door to find Tony Durham standing there with a cocky grin and a tool bag in his hand. Well, if it isn't the famous William Ford," Tony said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. "Diana didn't mention you'd arrived yet." "Funny," William replied, stepping outside and closing the door behind him. "She didn't mention she was expecting anyone." Tony's grin faltered slightly. Up close, William could see the man was nervous, and there was something else, the barely concealed excitement of someone about to commit violence. "Look, Tony, I know about you and Diana," William said calmly. Tony's hand moved toward his tool bag, but William was faster. Years of military training had honed his reflexes to a razor's edge. He grabbed Tony's wrist in a grip that made the other man wince. "I also know about your little plan," William continued, his voice deadly quiet. "The insurance policies, the fake documents, the accelerant under the bed. Did you really think you could murder me and get away with it?" Tony tried to pull away, but William's grip tightened. "Let me go, you psycho." "Here's what's going to happen," William said. "You're going to tell me everything. Every detail of your plan. Every lie Diana told me. Every document you forged. And if you do that, I might let you live to see trial." From inside the cabin, they could hear Diana calling out, "William, is everything okay out there?" Tony's face had gone pale. He'd expected to be dealing with a naive businessman, not someone who could break his wrist without breaking a sweat. She said you'd be easy," Tony stammered. "Just a rich guy who got lucky in business. She said you never fought back when she pushed you around." William almost laughed. Diana had clearly never understood the man she'd married. His quiet nature wasn't weakness. It was the controlled calm of someone who'd seen real violence and chose restraint. "She was wrong about a lot of things," William said. "Now start talking." In the distance, he could hear sirens approaching. Vincent had made good on his promise to call the sheriff. But William wasn't finished with Tony Durham yet. Not by a long shot. As the sound of law enforcement vehicles grew closer, William realized this was just the beginning. Diana and Tony had tried to destroy his life, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated who they were dealing with. William Ford had built an empire from nothing. He'd survived combat in some of the world's most dangerous places. And now, two amateur criminals thought they could outwit him. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Chapter 4. The investigation deepens. The sheriff's deputies arrived with flashing lights just as William was zip-tying Tony's hands with a cable tie from his truck's emergency kit. Tony had talked freely once he realized William could snap his arm like a twig, revealing the full scope of their plan. Sheriff Theodore Gomez, a weathered man in his 50s, stepped out of the lead vehicle. William recognized him from various community events. Their construction company had donated materials for several county projects. "William, what the hell is going on here?" "Sheriff Gomez, I'd like to report an attempted murder," William said calmly, not releasing his grip on Tony. "This man and my wife were planning to kill me tonight and make it look like an accident." Inside the cabin, they could hear Diana shouting, demanding to know what was happening. The look of terror on Tony's face was almost comical as three more deputies emerged from their vehicles. "He's lying," Tony blurted out. "This is all a misunderstanding." "Is it?" William asked, pulling out his phone. "Because I have photos of the accelerant you hid under the bed, the fake documents with my wife's forged signature, and your wedding photo with my wife on the mantelpiece." Sheriff Gomez's expression hardened. "Tony Durham. Should have known you'd be involved in something like this." "You know him?" William asked. "Oh, we know Tony real well. 3 outstanding warrants in 2 counties. Fraud, identity theft, and assault. We've been looking for this piece of garbage for months," Gomez said, accepting Tony's restrained form from William. As the deputies secured Tony in their vehicle, William and Sheriff Gomez approached the cabin. Diana met them at the door, her face a mask of confusion and concern. "William, Thank God you're okay. What's happening? Who is that man? She asked, her performance almost convincing. Diana, we need to talk, William said quietly. Sheriff Gomez held up his phone, showing her the photos William had sent him. Mrs. Ford, you want to explain why there's a wedding photo of you and Tony Durham on that mantle? Or maybe you'd like to discuss the life insurance policies and forged documents we found under the bed. Diana's mask slipped completely. For a moment, her face showed pure rage before she tried to compose herself. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen those things before. Really? William asked, his voice deadly calm. Because this handwritten note planning my death is in your handwriting. The same handwriting that signed our mortgage papers. The sheriff's radio crackled to life. Sheriff, this is Vincent Short. I'm en route with the security footage. You're going to want to see this. 20 minutes later, Vincent arrived with a laptop containing crystal-clear footage of Diana and Tony's activities over the past 2 days. The recordings showed them staging the cabin, hiding the accelerant, and Tony making what appeared to be a practice run of how he would attack William. There's more, Vincent said, opening another file. This morning's footage shows them discussing how they're going to make it look like William started drinking, fell asleep by the fire, and the cabin caught flame. Diana was supposed to be at a spa in Phoenix with witnesses. Diana's friend Shannon Harmon was indeed expecting her at the spa. Diana had planned to drive back to Phoenix immediately after William's accident to establish her alibi. The fire would have destroyed most evidence, Sheriff Gomez noted. If Vincent hadn't been monitoring his security system, this might have worked. As Diana was read her rights and placed under arrest, she finally dropped all pretense. You have no idea what you've cost me, William, she screamed. Do you think I enjoyed 5 years married to someone who cared more about his business than his wife? I cared about you, William replied quietly. I trusted you. I built a life with you. Your life, she spat. Everything was about your success, your projects, your reputation. I was just an accessory. William felt something cold settle in his chest. So you decided to kill me for it. I decided to take what I deserve. As the sheriff's vehicles disappeared down the mountain road with Diana and Tony, William found himself alone with Vincent Short, the man who had saved his life. Mr. Ford, I'm sorry you had to go through this, Vincent said. If there's anything I can do... Actually, there is, William replied, his mind already working. I need to know everything about how they found your cabin, how they contacted you, and what other properties they might have scouted. Vincent pulled out a folder. I thought you might ask that. I've been doing some digging since this morning. Your wife first contacted me 3 months ago, asking about isolated rental properties. She said she wanted to plan a surprise anniversary trip. 3 months, William mused. That was right around the time Diana had started acting differently. But here's the interesting part, Vincent continued. She wasn't the only one asking. I've had similar inquiries from Tony Durham, though he used a fake name, about several properties across Arizona and New Mexico. Properties owned by wealthy people, isolated locations, all with good fire insurance. William's blood chilled. You think we weren't their first target? I think you should call your brother the detective and have him look into some unsolved cases. Wealthy men dying in isolated cabin fires? There might be a pattern. As William drove back toward Phoenix that night, his phone rang constantly. Ryan calling to check on him, his business partners wondering about the police activity, reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the story. But William ignored them all. He had bigger things to plan. Diana and Tony thought their arrest was the end of their problems. They had no idea it was just the beginning. Chapter 5. Uncovering the Network. 3 days later, William sat in Detective Ryan Hubbard's office at the Phoenix Police Department, surrounded by case files and evidence boxes. Ryan had taken William's suggestion about unsolved cabin fires seriously, and what they discovered was far worse than either brother had imagined. 12 cases over 18 months, Ryan said, spreading out crime scene photos across his desk. Wealthy men, all found dead in cabin fires in remote locations across Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, all ruled accidental. William studied the photos. Any connection to Diana or Tony? More than I like, Ryan replied grimly. Look at this. He pulled out a thick manila folder. I had our computer crimes unit go through Tony's laptop. This guy kept records of everything, a real criminal mastermind in his own mind. They called it Operation Fresh Start. The laptop contained detailed profiles of wealthy men, their assets, their wives' routines, and their vulnerabilities. Diana wasn't Tony's only partner. He'd been working with at least 4 other women across 3 states, targeting successful men for murder and insurance fraud. The sick part, Ryan continued, is how he recruited them. Tony would target women married to wealthy men who were having midlife crises or feeling neglected. He'd seduce them, convince them their husbands didn't appreciate them, then gradually introduce the idea of taking what they deserved. William's jaw clenched. How many of these women went through with it? We think at least 7. The others either backed out or their husbands got suspicious and the plans fell apart. But 7 men are dead, Will. 7 families destroyed. Among the victims was Herbert Fuller, a tech entrepreneur from Tucson whose wife had burned to death with him in what was thought to be a tragic accident. Another was Edmund Benjamin, a successful rancher whose wife had mysteriously survived a cabin fire that killed him, claiming she'd gone for a late-night walk and returned to find the building engulfed. There's more, Ryan said, opening another file. Our investigation found bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, property purchases in Mexico, and evidence that Tony's been planning to disappear permanently once he'd accumulated enough money. What about Diana? William asked. She's trying to play victim, claiming Tony manipulated her. But the evidence suggests she was more involved than she's admitting. Look at this. Ryan showed William email exchanges between Diana and Tony dating back 8 months. The early messages were flirtatious, but they quickly escalated to detailed discussions about William's assets, his routine, and the best ways to ensure his death would look accidental. One particularly chilling email from Diana read, "William is so predictable. He never suspects anything because he thinks everyone is as honest as he is. His trust will be his downfall." She's not the victim here, William said quietly. No, she's not. But she's smart enough to let Tony take the fall for the murders while she claims emotional manipulation. Her lawyer is already pushing for a plea deal. What kind of plea deal? Reduced charges in exchange for testimony against Tony and information about the other murders. She could be out in 10 to 15 years instead of facing the death penalty. William stood and walked to Ryan's window, looking out at the Phoenix skyline he'd helped build. Below, construction crews were working on his latest project, a children's hospital that would serve the community for generations. That's not justice, he said. It's the justice system, Ryan replied. Sometimes it's all we have. Maybe, William said, but sometimes it's not enough. That evening, William returned to his empty mansion in Scottsdale. The house felt foreign now, filled with memories of a marriage that had been a lie. Every photo, every piece of furniture Diana had chosen, every room where she'd smiled and laughed while planning his death. His phone rang. Theodore Gomez, the defense attorney he'd met at various charity functions. "William, I heard about what happened. I wanted to offer my services if you need legal representation for any civil matters." "Actually, Theodore, there might be something you can help me with," William said, "but not in the way you're thinking." "Oh, I want to set up a foundation. Something to help the families of the men Tony and Diana murdered. Their wives were in on it, so there's no one to provide for their children, their parents, anyone who depended on them." "That's incredibly generous of you, William." "It's not generosity. It's justice. These families deserve better than having their loved ones' memories tainted by this scandal." What William didn't tell Theodore was that the foundation was only the beginning of his plan. He'd spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about Diana's smug confidence that she'd get a light sentence, about Tony's belief that he was smarter than everyone else, and about the 7 men who would never go home to their families. The justice system might be satisfied with plea deals and reduced sentences. But William Ford wasn't part of the justice system. He was something else entirely. Chapter 6, The Plan. 2 weeks after Diana's arrest, William received an unexpected visitor at his construction company headquarters. Caesar Chandler, a private investigator he'd never met, sat across from his desk with a folder full of documents. "Mr. Ford, I was hired by the family of Edmund Benjamin. one of Tony Durham's victims, Caesar explained. They want to sue the insurance companies that paid out on these fraudulent claims. That's understandable, William replied. Here's the thing, Caesar continued, leaning forward. My investigation has uncovered something the police missed. Tony Durham isn't working alone, and I don't just mean the women. He's got backing, financial and logistical support from someone with serious resources. Caesar opened his folder and spread out a series of photographs and financial records. Look at this. Tony's operation required significant upfront investment. Fake IDs, rental properties in multiple states, sophisticated surveillance equipment, and enough money to wine and dine wealthy women for months before making his move. William studied the documents. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting Tony Durham is a foot soldier, not the mastermind. Someone else is bankrolling this operation, and they're still out there. The photographs showed Tony meeting with well-dressed men in expensive restaurants, handing over envelopes, and making deposits into accounts linked to shell corporations. One photo in particular caught William's attention. Tony shaking hands with a man in a tailored suit outside a high-end law firm in Phoenix. Do you recognize it? Caesar asked. William did. It was Abel O'Connor, a prominent attorney who'd handled several high-profile insurance cases. More importantly, he was on the board of directors for the same country club where William and Diana had been members. Abel O'Connor has access to membership records, financial information, and social connections of some of the wealthiest families in Arizona, Caesar explained. He could have been feeding Tony targets for months. Have you taken this to the police? William asked. They're not interested. They have their suspects in custody and solved cases to close. Going after someone like O'Connor would require a much bigger investigation, and frankly, they don't think they have enough evidence. William leaned back in his chair. But you do. I think so. But I need someone with resources and influence to help prove it. Someone who understands how these people think. Someone like me. Exactly. That night, William met with his brother Ryan at a quiet restaurant outside Phoenix. He shared Caesar's findings and watched Ryan's expression grow increasingly grim. Well, you can't get involved in this kind of investigation. You're a victim, not a law enforcement officer. 7 men are dead, Ryan. Their families deserve to know the truth. And they'll get it through proper channels. But if you start playing detective, you could compromise the entire case. William understood his brother's position, but he also understood something Ryan didn't. The proper channels had failed these families once already. The police were satisfied with their arrests, the prosecutors were negotiating plea deals, and the real masterminds were probably already planning their next operation. What if I told you I wasn't planning to play detective? William asked. What do you mean? What if I told you I was planning something else entirely? Over the next hour, William outlined his plan. It was ambitious, risky, and completely legal, though just barely. You want to do what? Ryan asked. I want to buy the company O'Connor works for. William had done his research. O'Connor's law firm was struggling financially, over-leveraged from expanding too quickly during the economic boom. They needed capital injection or they'd face bankruptcy within 6 months. If I own the firm, I have access to all their files, their client records, their financial transactions. Everything Caesar needs to prove O'Connor's involvement. That's actually not a terrible idea, Ryan admitted. But it'll cost you millions. Ryan, I'm worth $40 million. Diana was planning to inherit all of it after murdering me. I think spending a few million to get justice for 7 dead men is money well spent. And then what? You turn the evidence over to prosecutors. William smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Among other things. What other things? Let me worry about that. 3 days later, William's attorney Theodore Gomez walked into the offices of O'Connor, Webb & Associates with an acquisition offer that was too good to refuse. The struggling law firm would be absorbed into a new company, Ford Legal Enterprises, with all current partners becoming highly paid employees. Abel O'Connor was thrilled. Not only was his financial crisis solved, but he'd be working for one of Arizona's most successful businessmen. He had no idea he'd just handed William Ford the keys to his own destruction. Within a week, William had full access to the firm's computers, files, and financial records. What he found there was worse than anything Caesar Chandler had imagined. The murder scheme hadn't targeted just 7 men. It had targeted 15. 8 more were in various stages of planning, with women already in place, relationships developing, and accidents being carefully orchestrated. One of those targets was Ryan Hubbard. Chapter 7. The Trap. The discovery that his brother was on Tony Durham's target list changed everything for William. Ryan was dating Christy Parrish, a woman he'd met at a police benefit dinner 6 months ago. According to the files in Abel O'Connor's office, Christy was one of Tony's recruits. William stared at the surveillance photos of Ryan and Christy, the detailed financial analysis of Ryan's assets, and the preliminary plan for his accident. It was all there in black and white. His brother was going to be the next victim. "We have to tell him," Caesar Chandler said. They were meeting in William's office after hours. The damning evidence spread across his conference table. "Not yet," William replied. "If we warn Ryan now, Christy will know we're onto them. She'll disappear, and we'll lose our chance to take down the entire network. Your brother could die. My brother is a trained police detective who survived 10 years on the force. He can handle himself if he knows what to look for." William's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of exposing the conspiracy immediately, he would use it to trap everyone involved. He'd already identified 12 people in the network: Tony Durham and Diana, in custody; Abel O'Connor, unknowingly under surveillance; Christy Parrish, and 8 other women across 3 states who were actively working to seduce and murder wealthy men. "Here's what we're going to do," William explained to Caesar. "We're going to feed them information about a new target, someone so wealthy and vulnerable that they can't resist." "Who? Me?" William's reasoning was sound. He was recently separated from his wife, emotionally devastated by her betrayal, and worth more money than any of their previous targets. He would also be easy to manipulate, or so they would think. "You want to use yourself as bait?" Caesar asked. "I want to give them exactly what they think they want, then take it all away from them." The plan required William to play the part of a broken man, someone whose judgment was compromised by his recent trauma. He began frequenting upscale bars and social events, making sure to appear lonely and vulnerable. Within 2 weeks, he was approached by Sherry Stewart, an attractive woman in her 30s who seemed fascinated by his story. Sherry was exactly what the files had predicted: sympathetic, charming, and gradually steering their conversations toward his assets and emotional state. She suggested weekend getaways, complained about her own financial struggles, and slowly built the kind of relationship that would make her a beneficiary if something happened to him. Meanwhile, Caesar was documenting everything. Hidden cameras in William's office captured Sherry's reports to Abel O'Connor. Phone taps recorded conversations between O'Connor and the network's other operatives. Bank records showed payments flowing from shell corporations to the various women involved. "The evidence is overwhelming," Caesar reported during one of their meetings. "We have enough to arrest everyone and shut down the entire operation." "Not yet," Williams said. "We need to catch them in the act. Otherwise, they'll claim it was all talk, that they never intended to go through with it. That means letting them try to kill you. That means letting them think they're trying to kill me." Williams' military background included training in tactical deception and controlled explosions. With help from his construction company's demolition experts, he began preparing for the final phase of his plan. The trap would be set at a remote property he owned in the mountains north of Phoenix, a hunting lodge that was isolated, surrounded by forest, and perfect for staging an accident. He would bring Sherry there for a romantic weekend, just as Diana had brought him to Vincent Short's cabin. But unlike Diana's plan, Williams would work. "There's one problem," Caesar pointed out during their final planning session. "What about your brother? Christy Parrish is getting more aggressive in her pursuit. According to our surveillance, she's pushing for Ryan to take a weekend trip with her next month." William had been monitoring that situation as well. Ryan and Christy's relationship was developing exactly as the files had predicted. She was gaining his trust, learning his routines, and gradually introducing the idea of isolated getaways. "I'll handle Christy after we take down the others," Williams said. "But first, we spring the trap on Sherry and see who comes to help her. And if something goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong," William replied with the confidence of a man who'd survived combat zones and built an empire from nothing. I've been planning this for months. Every detail has been considered. What William couldn't have anticipated was that Abel O'Connor had been planning as well. The lawyer had grown suspicious of William's acquisition of his firm and had begun his own investigation into his new employer. O'Connor's investigation had uncovered Caesar Chandler's involvement, the surveillance equipment, and enough evidence to realize that William Ford wasn't the broken, vulnerable target he appeared to be. The trap was set, but both sides knew about it. The question was who would spring it first. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. The hunting lodge sat in darkness as William's truck wound up the mountain road. Sherry Stewart sat beside him, chatting nervously about how romantic and isolated the location looked. What she didn't know was that the lodge had been equipped with enough surveillance equipment to make an intelligence agency jealous. Caesar Chandler was monitoring from a command post 5 miles away, with Ryan Hubbard and Sheriff Theodore Gomez standing by with tactical teams. The plan was simple. Let Sherry and her accomplices reveal themselves, document their attempted murder, then move in for arrests. "The fireplace looks so cozy," Sherry said as they entered the lodge. "I'll get some wine while you start a fire." William began arranging kindling in the fireplace, noting how Sherry immediately disappeared into the kitchen. Through his concealed earpiece, he could hear Caesar's voice. "She's making a phone call. Confirm contact with O'Connor." The plan called for William to appear to drink wine that Sherry would drug, then pretend to pass out near the fireplace. Hidden in the logs were controlled explosive charges that would create the appearance of an accidental fire while actually directing the flames away from William's location. Sherry and her accomplices would flee, thinking they'd successfully murdered him, only to be arrested as they tried to leave the mountain. But as William knelt by the fireplace, he heard something that made his blood freeze: the sound of multiple vehicles approaching the lodge. "Caesar, how many people are supposed to be coming?" he whispered into his microphone. "Just Sherry's backup. Should be 2 people max." Through the window, William could see at least 6 vehicles. This wasn't a simple murder plot. This was something else entirely. Sherry returned from the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine, but her demeanor had completely changed. The nervous, romantic act was gone, replaced by cold confidence. "You could drop the act now, William," she said calmly. "We know who you are and what you've been planning." The front door burst open, and Abel O'Connor walked in with 5 other men. William recognized 2 of them from Caesar's surveillance photos, Tony Durham's financial backers. "William Ford," O'Connor said with a satisfied smile. "The man who thought he could outsmart us." "Abel," William replied, standing slowly. "I should have known you'd figure it out. Did you really think buying my law firm would give you access to our operation? We've been feeding you false information for weeks. The real network is much larger than what you found in those files." O'Connor gestured to his companions. "Meet the real power behind Operation Fresh Start. We've been running this operation for 3 years, and you're not the first person who thought they could expose us." "What happened to the others?" William asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Accidents," O'Connor replied. "Tragic accidents that served as warnings to anyone else who might get too curious." Through his earpiece, William could hear frantic chatter from Caesar and Ryan. The tactical teams were moving into position, but they were badly outnumbered. O'Connor hadn't just figured out William's plan. He'd turned it into a trap of his own. "Here's what's going to happen," O'Connor continued. "You're going to have an accident in this lodge tonight. A fire, probably caused by drinking too much and falling asleep by the fireplace. Very tragic. Your brother Ryan will probably die in a similar accident next week. Christy has everything planned, and my construction company will be inherited by Diana, your grieving widow who was tragically in jail when you died. Amazing how quickly grief can overturn criminal convictions when you have the right lawyers." William felt a cold fury building in his chest. Not only had they planned to murder him and Ryan, but they intended to free Diana and give her everything he'd built. "There's just one problem with your plan, Abel," William said calmly. "Oh, what's that?" "You're standing in a building I designed." William pulled a small device from his pocket. Not the fake detonator he'd planned to use for the controlled fire, but a real one connected to emergency charges he'd installed throughout the lodge as a precaution. This entire building is rigged to collapse in a controlled demolition. Every support beam, every load-bearing wall. If I activate this device, we all die, but my death will be ruled a murder-suicide instead of an accident. Your operation dies with us. O'Connor's confidence wavered. You're bluffing. Am I? William asked. You've read my military record. You know I've been in situations where the only way to complete the mission was to make sure everyone died. Through the window, William could see Ryan and the tactical teams in position. All he had to do was keep O'Connor talking until they could move in. But O'Connor was smarter than William had given him credit for. Sherry, signal the others. Kill the police first, then we'll deal with Mr. Ford. The sound of gunfire erupted outside. Chapter 9. Justice Served. The gunfight lasted exactly 17 minutes. William knew this because he counted every second while holding O'Connor and his men hostage in the lodge with his dead man switch. The controlled demolition device was real, but William had no intention of using it unless absolutely necessary. Through his earpiece, he could hear Ryan coordinating the tactical response. The attackers outside were well-armed, but ultimately outmatched by trained law enforcement officers who knew the terrain and had the advantage of cover. Your backup is dead or surrendering, William told O'Connor as the gunfire died down. Now it's just us. O'Connor's face had gone ashen. You don't understand what you're dealing with. This operation spans multiple states, involves dozens of people. Even if you stop us, there are others. I'm counting on it, William replied. What O'Connor didn't know was that Caesar Chandler had spent the past month identifying every person connected to the network. Bank records, phone logs, travel patterns, and financial transactions had revealed the full scope of Operation Fresh Start. Tonight's confrontation wasn't just about stopping one group. It was about gathering the final evidence needed to arrest everyone involved. William, this is Ryan. His brother's voice came through the earpiece. Building is secure. We're coming in. Come on in, William replied, never taking his eyes off O'Connor. The tactical team that entered the lodge was led by Sheriff Theodore Gomez and included federal agents from 3 states. Operation Fresh Start had crossed state lines and involved federal crimes, making it a multi-jurisdictional investigation. Abel O'Connor, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and racketeering, Sheriff Gomez announced. As O'Connor was handcuffed, he looked at William with pure hatred. You have no idea what you've cost me. 7 innocent men and their families, William replied. I know exactly what I've cost you. The aftermath moved quickly. Within 48 hours, arrests were made in Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and California. 23 people were charged with various crimes related to the murder-for-hire network. The evidence collected from O'Connor's law firm, combined with testimony from survivors and financial records, painted a picture of an operation that had murdered at least 12 men and attempted to murder 5 others. Diana Ford's plea agreement was revoked when prosecutors discovered her role in recruiting other women for the network. She would face trial for first-degree murder and conspiracy charges that carried the death penalty. Tony Durham, faced with evidence of his involvement in 12 murders, accepted a plea agreement that would keep him in prison for the rest of his life without the possibility of parole. Christy Parrish was arrested while trying to flee to Mexico. Her plan to murder Ryan Hubbard was documented in detail, including surveillance photos of her scouting locations for his accident. But William's most satisfying moment came 6 months later, when the William Ford Foundation held its first annual benefit dinner. The foundation, funded with the money Diana had tried to steal, provided college scholarships for the children of murder victims and support for families affected by violent crime. Ryan Hubbard, who had survived his brush with Christy Parrish and returned to duty with the Phoenix Police Department, served as the foundation's first board president. You know, Ryan said as they watched families receive scholarship checks, when this all started, I thought you were going to do something crazy for revenge. I did, William replied. What do you mean? I could have killed them all in that lodge. I had the charges, I had the opportunity, and I had the justification. Nobody would have questioned it if I'd blown up the building with all of us inside. But you didn't. No, I didn't. Because the best revenge isn't destruction, it's justice. Diana and Tony and O'Connor thought they could destroy lives without consequences. Now they'll spend the rest of their lives paying for what they did. William looked around the room at the families who were rebuilding their lives with help from the foundation. Children who would go to college because their fathers' deaths had meaning. Widows who were starting new businesses with foundation grants. Communities that were safer because a network of killers had been stopped. This is better than revenge, William continued. This is making sure their victims' lives mattered. As the evening wound down, William received a text message from Caesar Chandler, who is now working full-time for the foundation. Federal trial starts next month. All defendants pleading guilty. O'Connor gets life without parole. Diana gets death penalty. Justice served. William deleted the message and looked out at the Phoenix skyline he'd helped build. Somewhere out there, other criminals were planning other schemes, but they'd have to get past men like Ryan Hubbard and Theodore Gomez now. The good guys had won this time. And William Ford, successful businessman, loving brother, and survivor, had made sure it would stay that way. Diana had been wrong about one thing. William's trust hadn't been his downfall. It had been his strength. He'd trusted the right people. His brother, Sheriff Gomez, Caesar Chandler, Vincent Short, and together they brought down a network of killers that could have continued operating for years. As William drove home to his new house, he'd sold the mansion and all its painful memories. He thought about the weekend that had changed everything. If Vincent Short hadn't been monitoring his security cameras, if Diana's plan had worked, William would have died thinking his wife loved him. Instead, he'd lived to see justice done and built something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. It wasn't the ending anyone would have expected from that weekend getaway, but it was the ending everyone deserved. And for William Ford, that was enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Facade. The suburban house on Maple Street looked perfect from the outside. Manicured lawn, white picket fence, and a family that seemed to have it all. Inside, however, the Sparks household was anything but harmonious. Mitch Sparks sat at the kitchen table, methodically eating his cereal while his wife Beverly paced around the kitchen, her phone constantly buzzing with text messages. She'd grown more distant over the past 6 months, always finding excuses to leave the house, always with somewhere urgent to be. "Dad, can I get a car for my birthday?" 17-year-old Scott demanded, not bothering to look up from his phone. "All my friends have cars, and I'm tired of looking like a loser." Mitch looked at his son calmly. "We'll see, Scott. Cars are expensive, and I'm just a simple office worker." Beverly snorted from across the kitchen. "Simple is right," she muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. 14-year-old Katie shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She was the only one who seemed to notice the tension that had been building in their home. "Maybe we could look at used cars," she suggested quietly. "Katie, don't enable him," Beverly snapped. "Your father needs to learn to provide for his family properly." Mitch continued eating his cereal, seemingly unbothered by his wife's barbs. He'd perfected this act over the years, the mild-mannered husband who took whatever was thrown at him. But behind his calm exterior, his mind was always working, always observing, always calculating. That evening, as Beverly claimed she was going to her book club for the 3rd time that week, Mitch decided to follow her. He waited 10 minutes after she left, then got in his old sedan and drove to the upscale part of town. Beverly's car was parked outside the Grandview Hotel. From the shadows of the parking lot, Mitch watched as Beverly met Dennis Townsend at the hotel entrance. Dennis was everything Mitch appeared not to be: tall, confident, wearing an expensive suit and driving a BMW. He owned a successful real estate company and was known around town as a player. Mitch took photos with a small camera, documenting their embrace, their obvious intimacy. But unlike most betrayed husbands, he felt no pain, no shock. Instead, he felt something else entirely: opportunity. He'd been waiting for this moment for years, waiting for Beverly to show her true colors so completely that when he destroyed her, no one would question whether she deserved it. Chapter 2: Foundations of Betrayal. 20 years earlier, Mitch Sparks had been Mitchell Raymond Briggs, a different man entirely. He'd grown up in the foster system, learning early that the world was cruel and that survival meant being smarter, more ruthless, and more patient than everyone else around you. By 25, he'd built a small fortune through a combination of strategic investments and ventures that operated in the gray areas of legality. He was nobody's victim, nobody's fool. But then he'd met Beverly Bradshaw at a charity gala, and for the first time in his life, he'd wanted something beyond money and power. He'd wanted a normal life. Beverly had been beautiful, charming, and seemingly sweet. She came from a middle-class family and claimed to value simple things: love, family, stability. Mitch had seen her as a chance to build something real, something lasting. So he'd buried Mitchell Briggs and become Mitch Sparks, a mild-mannered office worker with modest ambitions. He'd legally changed his name, created a paper trail of the boring middle management job, and even set up a modest income to match his new persona. His real wealth remained hidden, managed through a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts that even the IRS couldn't trace back to him. Beverly had fallen for the act completely. She'd married him, believing she was getting a safe, predictable husband who would never challenge her or cause drama. What she'd really gotten was a predator who'd chosen to play house, until she gave him a reason not to. Meanwhile, Dennis Townsend had his own story. Born into wealth, he'd never faced real consequences for his actions. He'd cheated on his first wife, Courtney Clark, with multiple women before she'd finally divorced him. He'd built his real estate empire partly through legitimate means and partly by screwing over clients who trusted him. He was exactly the kind of man who would seduce another man's wife just because he could. Beverly and Dennis had met 6 months ago when she'd inquired about selling some property she'd inherited from her grandmother. Dennis had turned on the charm, and Beverly, bored with her predictable marriage and feeling entitled to more excitement, had fallen for it immediately. What neither of them realized was that Mitch had been tracking Dennis for years, waiting for the right moment to bring him down. Dennis had once cheated Mitch's elderly neighbor, Maggie McGuire, out of her family home through a predatory deal that was technically legal but morally bankrupt. Mitch had been planning Dennis's destruction long before the affair began. The affair was just the perfect catalyst for something much bigger. Chapter 3: The Game Begins. Maggie McGuire had been Mitch's neighbor for 15 years, and one of the few people he'd genuinely cared about. The elderly woman had lost her husband in Iraq and her son in Afghanistan, leaving her alone with only her small house and her memories. When she needed to sell for medical bills, Dennis had swooped in with an offer that was a fraction of the property's value, using complex legal language to hide the true terms until it was too late. Mitch had found Maggie crying on her porch the day she'd realized what had happened. He'd comforted her, helped her pack, and quietly ensured she had enough money to live comfortably in a nice senior community. But he'd never forgotten what Dennis had done to her. Now, sitting in his home office while Beverly was out with Dennis again, Mitch pulled out a secure phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Raymond Briggs. Came the gravelly voice on the other end. "Hello, Ray. It's Mitchell." Raymond Briggs, who'd taken Mitch's discarded identity when he'd become Sparks, was Mitch's oldest associate and the one person who knew all his secrets. Ray had built his own empire over the years, operating from the shadows while Mitch played suburban husband. Well, the ghost returns. What's the occasion? I need to accelerate our timeline on the Townsend project, and I need you to prepare the Lazarus Protocol. The Lazarus Protocol was their code name for Mitch's plan to shed his fake identity and reclaim his power when the time was right. Like the mythical phoenix, he would rise from the ashes of his ordinary life more powerful than ever. How accelerated are we talking? 2 weeks. And Ray? This time, we're not just taking him down. We're taking everyone who betrayed me. The next morning, Mitch announced to his family that he'd been invited to speak at an important business conference. It was a lie, of course. He was actually meeting with Ray to finalize their plans. Beverly barely looked up from her phone. How long will you be gone? 3 days. Think you can manage without me? She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in months. Oh, I think I'll find ways to keep myself busy. Scott snorted. Maybe you'll finally do something important for once. Katie shot her brother a disapproving look, but said nothing. She'd been watching the family dynamics more carefully lately, and, unlike Scott, she'd noticed that their father never seemed quite as helpless as he pretended to be. That evening, as Mitch packed his bag, he found Beverly in their bedroom, trying on a new dress, something expensive and revealing that she definitely hadn't bought for his benefit. Special occasion? He asked mildly. Just felt like treating myself, she said, not meeting his eyes. It's beautiful. Dennis will love it. Beverly froze, her face going white. What did you say? I said Dennis will love it. Because that's who you bought it for, isn't it? Dennis Townsend, your lover. For a moment, Beverly looked terrified. Then her expression hardened into something ugly and defiant. So what if it is? What are you going to do about it, Mitch? You don't have the backbone for a real fight. Mitch smiled. Not his usual mild, harmless smile, but something altogether more dangerous. You know, Beverly, you're absolutely right. The man you married doesn't have the backbone for a fight. Lucky for me, I stopped being that man the moment you decided to betray everything we built together. Don't be ridiculous. You're a middle manager at an insurance company. You drive a 10-year-old sedan and buy your clothes at discount stores. What could you possibly do to someone like Dennis? I guess we'll find out, Mitch said calmly. But I'll give you one chance, Beverly. End it with Dennis, and we can work this out quietly. Keep going, and I promise you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Beverly laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. Are you threatening me? You? That's rich, Mitch. You couldn't intimidate a goldfish. No, Mitch said, zipping up his suitcase. I'm not threatening you. I'm promising you. There's a difference. As he walked toward the door, Beverly called after him. Why divorce you? I'm taking everything. The house, the kids, whatever pathetic savings you have. Dennis has lawyers who will eat you alive. Mitch paused at the doorway, without turning around. Beverly, you should probably enjoy these next few days. They're going to be the last happy ones you have for a very long time. Chapter 4. The Architect's Return. 3 days later, Mitch returned from his business conference a changed man. Or rather, he'd stopped pretending to be someone he wasn't. He walked into his house with a confidence that seemed to radiate from his very bones, carrying himself like a man who owned the world. Katie noticed immediately. Dad, you seem different. Just had some good meetings, sweetheart. Sometimes a change of perspective is exactly what you need. Scott barely looked up from his video game. Did you finally get promoted or something? Something like that, Mitch said, ruffling his son's hair, a gesture that somehow seemed less paternal and more predatory than it used to. Beverly was out, presumably with Dennis, so Mitch spent the evening with Katie, actually listening to her talk about school, her friends, her worries about the family. She was a perceptive kid, and she'd been carrying the weight of her parents' problems without anyone to talk to. Dad, she said finally, are you and Mom going to get divorced? Mitch considered his answer carefully. Katie was innocent in all this, and while Scott had chosen his side, she deserved better than to be caught in the crossfire. Katie, I want you to know that whatever happens between your mother and me, it won't be your fault. And no matter what anyone else says, I love you, and I always will. But not Scott. Scott is old enough to make his own choices about loyalty and respect, and choices have consequences. The next morning, Beverly came home with a glow that had nothing to do with her book club. She seemed surprised to find Mitch sitting at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper as if nothing had changed. How was your conference? She asked, though she clearly didn't care about the answer. Illuminating. I learned a lot about myself. That's nice, Beverly said dismissively, already heading upstairs. Oh, and Beverly? I've scheduled a family meeting for tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock. Make sure you're here. She paused on the stairs. A family meeting? What for? We need to discuss some changes that are coming. Important changes that will affect everyone. What kind of changes? Mitch looked up from his newspaper with that new, dangerous smile. The kind that happen when people push too far and discover that not everyone is who they seem to be. That afternoon, while Beverly was out shopping, probably for more clothes to impress Dennis. Mitch received a visit from Courtney Clark, Dennis's ex-wife. She was an elegant woman in her 40s, with the bearing of someone who'd learned hard lessons about trusting the wrong people. Mrs. Clark, Mitch said, inviting her in, "Thank you for coming. Please call me Courtney. And thank you for reaching out. When your associate contacted me, I wasn't sure what to expect. I imagine Raymond can be intimidating when he wants to be." Courtney smiled grimly. He explained that you might need my testimony about Dennis's character. I have to ask, is this about your wife? Among other things, Dennis destroyed someone I care about, and now he's destroying my family. I believe in consequences. Then you and I understand each other perfectly. Dennis cost me everything I worked for, and he did it with a smile on his face. If you're planning to take him down, you have my full support. They spent 2 hours going over the details of Dennis's pattern of behavior, the financial manipulation, the emotional abuse, the way he targeted vulnerable women and exploited their trust. Courtney had documentation of everything, kept as insurance against the man who'd nearly destroyed her life. He thinks he's untouchable, Courtney said as she prepared to leave. Everyone in town thinks he's charming and successful. They don't see the predator underneath. They will, Mitch promised. Very soon, everyone will see exactly what Dennis Townsend really is. Chapter 5. The Revelation. The family meeting that Beverly had dismissed as one of Mitch's usual attempts to assert authority turned out to be anything but typical. At precisely 7 o'clock, the Sparks family gathered in their living room. Beverly checking her phone constantly, Scott slouched his chair looking bored, and Katie sitting quietly, sensing that something important was about to happen. "Thank you all for being here," Mitch began, standing at the front of the room like he was addressing a board meeting rather than his family. "I know some of you think this is unnecessary, but I assure you, what I'm about to tell you will change everything." Beverly rolled her eyes. "Can we make this quick? I have somewhere to be." "I know exactly where you think you're going, Beverly. You're planning to meet Dennis Townsend at the Grandview Hotel, just like you have every Tuesday and Friday for the past 6 months." The blood drained from Beverly's face, but she quickly recovered, putting on a defiant expression. "How dare you spy on me? How dare I?" Mitch's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "How dare you bring your lover into our bed while our children slept down the hall? How dare you spend money I earned on gifts for another man? How dare you turn our son against me while you were busy betraying everything our marriage was supposed to represent?" Scott finally looked up from his phone, confused. "What's he talking about, Mom?" Beverly's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "Your mother has been having an affair," Mitch said calmly, "with Dennis Townsend, a man who makes his living by cheating people out of their homes and their dignity." "That's ridiculous." Beverly finally found her voice. "You can't prove any of that." Mitch pulled out a manila folder and opened it on the coffee table, revealing photographs, hotel receipts, and phone records. "Actually, I can prove all of it. But that's not why I called this meeting." He walked to the window and looked out at the darkening sky. "You see, I've been living a lie for 20 years. I created a safe, predictable life because I thought that's what would make you happy. I became Mitchell Sparks, the humble office worker, because Beverly Bradshaw said she wanted a simple man who would love her and put family first." Beverly was shaking now, though whether from anger or fear was unclear. "You're having some kind of breakdown, Mitch. You're scaring the children." "No, Beverly. What's scary is what you've done to this family. What's scary is how you've poisoned our son against me while you were busy screwing another man. What's scary is that you actually thought I would just sit back and let you destroy everything I built." Scott jumped to his feet, his face red with anger. "You can't talk to Mom like that. You're just a loser who can't provide for his family. You can't even afford a car. So shut your damn mouth." Beverly laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. He doesn't even feel disrespected because he's used to it. Mitch turned from the window, and his expression was something none of them had ever seen before, cold, calculating, and absolutely merciless. Outside, they could hear the distant sound of helicopter rotors approaching. "Used to it," Mitch said quietly. "You think I'm used to disrespect? Let me tell you something about respect, Scott. Respect isn't given to people because of what they drive or how much money they appear to have. Respect is earned through power, through intelligence, and through the ability to destroy anyone who threatens what you've built. The helicopter sound was getting louder. You want to know about cars, Scott? I own 17 of them, including a Bugatti that costs more than most people's houses. You want to know about money? I have more wealth than Dennis Townsend could dream of. You want to know about power? The helicopter was directly overhead now, its rotors drowning out everything else. Through the window, they could see it descending toward their front lawn, its spotlights illuminating the entire neighborhood. Mitch smiled. Not his old, harmless smile, but something predatory and triumphant. My ride's here. Scott's face had gone white as a sheet, his mouth hanging open in shock. Beverly swayed on her feet, her eyes rolling back as she fainted dead away, crashing to the floor. Katie stared at her father with wide eyes, but unlike the others, she didn't look terrified. She looked amazed. Chapter 6. The Phoenix Rises. As Beverly came to on the living room floor, she found herself looking up at a man she no longer recognized. The helicopter had landed on their front lawn, and through the window, she could see neighbors gathering at a safe distance, phones out, recording everything. What is this?" she whispered. "This," Mitch said, straightening his tie with practiced precision, "is the end of Mitchell Sparks and the return of someone much more dangerous." A man in an expensive suit entered through the front door without knocking. Raymond Briggs, though he looked nothing like the mild-mannered office worker Mitch claimed to be. This man radiated authority and barely contained violence. "Sorry I'm late," Ray said, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Had to make a stop at the Townsend place. Dennis sends his regrets. He's currently zip-tied in the back of a van, heading somewhere he can think about his life choices." Scott was hyperventilating. "Dad, who are you?" "I'm the man who built a fortune before you were born, who could have bought this entire town if I'd wanted to. I'm the man who chose to bury his power in his past because he thought love and family were more important than money and respect." Mitch's voice was getting harder with each word. "I'm the man who made the mistake of thinking that people like your mother and her lover could be trusted with that sacrifice." Beverly tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't support her. "This is impossible. You work at Consolidated Insurance. You make $42,000 a year. Consolidated Insurance is one of 47 companies I own through various shell corporations. The man who's been signing your paychecks for the past 8 years works for me. Your lover, Dennis? 3 of his biggest real estate deals in the past 5 years were financed through my holdings. The hotel where you've been meeting him, I bought last week." Ray handed Mitch a tablet, showing security footage from the hotel hallway. Every encounter, every conversation, every moment of their affair has been recorded. "But that's not the best part." "What's the best part?" Katie asked quietly. She was the only one who seemed to be handling this revelation with any composure. "The best part," Mitch said, scrolling through the tablet, "is that Dennis has been recording these encounters himself. Apparently, he's been blackmailing several of his married lovers, including your mother. The recordings he made are quite explicit." Beverly's face went ashen. "He said those were private. He said he would never. Dennis Townsend is a predator who's been exploiting women like you for years. Did you really think you were special? Did you think you were the first married woman he convinced to betray her family?" Ray pulled out a second tablet. "Dennis has been running this scam for almost a decade. Seduce married women, record the encounters, then blackmail them for money or information about their husband's businesses. Your wife here just happened to pick the worst possible target." Scott was shaking his head in denial. "This is all fake. You're making this up to try to win Mom back." "Win her back?" Mitch laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused. "Scott, I wouldn't take your mother back if she was the last woman on earth. She made her choice when she decided that Dennis Townsend was worth more than 20 years of marriage. But more importantly, she made her choice when she turned you against me. I turned myself against you. You're pathetic. And whose voice do you think I hear when you say that? Whose words are coming out of your mouth? Your mother has spent months poisoning you against me, filling your head with her resentment and her contempt. Well, now you know the truth about both of us." Mitch walked over to the window, looking out at the helicopter waiting on their lawn. "Beverly, you have a choice to make. You can come quietly, admit what you've done, and we can arrange a divorce that leaves you with enough money to rebuild your life. Or you can keep fighting me, and I can destroy you so completely that you'll end up with nothing but regret. Come quietly where? She whispered. To a very private facility where you and Dennis can face the consequences of your actions. Don't worry, it's not illegal exactly. Just unpleasant. Ray checked his watch. The van with Dennis should be arriving at the facility in about an hour. He's going to have some very interesting conversations with the husbands of the other women he's been blackmailing. Beverly looked around the room desperately, as if searching for an ally. Katie, sweetie, you don't believe this, do you? Your father has lost his mind. Katie looked at her mother with an expression far too mature for her 14 years. I believe Dad has been protecting us from something, and you just forced him to stop. Scott was still trying to process everything. So, you're really rich and powerful, and you just pretended to be nobody. I became nobody because I thought being somebody would make it harder to be a good father and husband. I was wrong. Being nobody just made it easier for people to take advantage of me. But you can't just kidnap people. Scott protested. That's illegal. Mitch turned back to his son with an expression of profound disappointment. Scott, your mother has been cheating on me for 6 months. She's been teaching you to disrespect me while she betrayed everything our family was supposed to stand for. Her lover has been blackmailing her and planning to destroy our family for his own profit. And your concern is that what I'm doing might be illegal. I didn't know about the blackmail. You didn't know about any of it. But you chose to treat me like garbage anyway, because it was easier than thinking for yourself. The sound of car engines approaching interrupted the conversation. Through the window, they could see 3 black SUVs pulling up behind the helicopter. Time to go, Ray said. Mitchell, the teams are in position. Everything you requested has been arranged. Mitch looked at his family one last time. At Beverly, pale and terrified on the floor. At Scott, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what he'd been part of. And at Katie, watching everything with intelligent, calculating eyes. Beverly, you're coming with me. You and Dennis are going to face justice for what you've done. And us. Katie asked quietly. You, sweetheart, are going to live with your Aunt Margaret while I clean up this mess. You'll be safe, you'll be provided for, and when this is over, you can decide if you want to be part of my life or not. What about Scott? Mitch looked at his son with eyes that held no warmth, no forgiveness. Scott made his choice. He can live with the consequences. Chapter 7. The Facility. The facility was a converted warehouse in an industrial part of the city, the kind of place where screams wouldn't carry and where people could disappear without anyone asking questions. It wasn't designed for torture. Mitch wasn't a sadist. It was designed for truth, for confrontation, and for the kind of justice that the legal system couldn't provide. Beverly sat in a stark white room, handcuffed to a metal chair, finally understanding that the man she'd married wasn't who she'd thought he was. Through a one-way mirror, she could see Dennis in the next room, zip-tied to his own chair, his expensive suit torn and his face bruised from his struggle with Ray's team. Mitch entered Beverly's room carrying a file folder and a laptop. He'd changed clothes. Gone was the suburban dad uniform of khakis and polo shirts, replaced by a perfectly tailored black suit that cost more than most people's cars. I want you to understand something, Beverly, he said, setting the laptop on the table between them. What happens next isn't about revenge. It's about consequences. You can't just kidnap people, Mitch. This is insane. My name isn't Mitch. It never was. Mitch Sparks was a character I created because Beverly Bradshaw said she wanted a simple, honest man who would put family first. He opened the laptop and showed her a video file. This is who I really am. The video showed a younger version of her husband, but he looked nothing like the man she'd married. This version was harder, more dangerous, sitting across from men in expensive suits and discussing business deals worth millions of dollars. His voice was different too, colder, more commanding. I built my first million by the time I was 25, he continued. By 30, I controlled a network of businesses that spanned 3 countries. I could have been a billionaire by now if I hadn't decided that what I really wanted was a family. Beverly was shaking. Why didn't you tell me? Because you said you didn't want money and power. You said you wanted authenticity, simplicity, love. So I gave you exactly what you asked for. I became exactly the man you said you wanted to marry. I didn't ask you to lie to me, didn't you? When we first met, I tried to tell you about my business interests. You said you found ambitious men intimidating. You said you preferred men who were real and down to earth. So I became real and down to earth. The laptop showed another video, Dennis and Beverly in the hotel room, but not one of their romantic encounters. This was Dennis showing Beverly documents, talking about Mitch's pathetic financial situation, discussing how they could take everything in a divorce. He was using you, Mitch said quietly. From the very beginning, this was never about love or passion. Dennis researched me, found out about my fake identity, and decided you were the perfect tool to get inside my life and steal whatever he could. Beverly watched herself on the screen, laughing as Dennis talked about how easy it would be to clean out her husband. I didn't know he was recording us. You didn't know he was recording you having sex either, but he's been doing that too, along with all the other married women he seduced. You weren't special, Beverly. You were just another mark. In the next room, Dennis was having his own revelation. Courtney Clark sat across from him, flanked by two other women he'd victimized over the years. "Hello, Dennis," Courtney said calmly. "I'd like you to meet some friends of mine." The woman on her left was Maria Santos, a widow Dennis had convinced to sell her family home for a fraction of its value. The woman on her right was Dr. Sarah Chun, a successful surgeon whose marriage Dennis had destroyed by seducing her and then blackmailing her with the recordings. "Ladies," Dennis said, trying to summon his usual charm despite being tied to a chair. "This is all a misunderstanding. I can explain. Explain how you recorded us without consent." Dr. Chun interrupted. "Explain how you used those recordings to blackmail us. Explain how you destroyed our lives for your own entertainment." Maria leaned forward, her eyes blazing with fury. "You cost me my grandmother's house. The house where I raised my children, where my husband died. You took it from me with lies and manipulation, and then you sold it for 10 times what you paid me. That was business. Business." Courtney laughed bitterly. "You call destroying families business? You call ruining lives business?" Through the speakers, they could hear Beverly crying in the next room as Mitch showed her more evidence of Dennis's manipulation. "Do you see what he really thinks of you?" Mitch was saying. "Do you see how little you meant to him? You threw away 20 years of marriage for a man who was using you as a pawn in a game you didn't even know you were playing." Chapter 8. The Price of Betrayal. Back at the Sparks house, Scott sat alone in his room, staring at his phone. The videos his friends had taken of the helicopter landing were all over social media, and the comments ranged from amazed to terrified. Nobody seemed to know who his father really was, but everyone agreed that this wasn't normal suburban dad behavior. Katie knocked on his door. "Scott, can I come in?" "Whatever," he mumbled. She entered and sat on his bed, looking at him with concern. "Are you okay? How can you ask me that? Our dad just kidnapped Mom and her boyfriend. He's apparently some kind of criminal mastermind. Nothing is okay. Is that really what you think? That dad is the bad guy here." Scott looked at his sister incredulously. "He literally kidnapped people, Katie. Mom was cheating on him. For months. And from what I could tell, this Dennis guy was planning to rob us. So, that doesn't mean Dad could just go all vigilante on them." Katie was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you remember when Mom started acting different? When she started being mean to Dad all the time? She wasn't being mean. She was just tired of him being pathetic." "Who told you he was pathetic?" Scott opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. The truth was, he hadn't really thought his father was pathetic until his mother started saying it constantly. Before that, he thought his dad was pretty cool. He always helped with homework, never missed a game or school event, and he had a way of making everything seem okay, even when it wasn't. Mom said a lot of things. But did you ever actually see Dad fail at anything important? Did you ever see him back down from protecting us? Did you ever see him treat anyone badly? Scott thought about it. His father had never raised his voice, never been violent, never failed to provide for the family. Even when Scott had been cruel to him, especially in recent months, his dad had taken it without fighting back. Maybe, Katie continued, Dad wasn't pathetic. Maybe he was just kind, and maybe Mom took advantage of that kindness until he couldn't take it anymore. But he lied to us about who he is, about the money, about everything. Did he lie? Or did he just not tell us something that wasn't relevant to our lives? We had everything we needed. We were safe, we were loved, we were provided for. What difference would it have made if we'd known he was rich? Scott couldn't answer that. Meanwhile, at the facility, Beverly was learning exactly what difference it made. Mitch had shown her financial records proving that he'd been supporting not just their family, but also her parents' medical bills, her sister's mortgage payments, and even Scott's college fund, which was worth significantly more than she'd ever imagined. You could have lived like a queen, Mitch said, showing her pictures of the properties he owned around the world. Mansions, yachts, private jets. You could have had anything you wanted. All you had to do was stay loyal to the man who loved you. I didn't know, Beverly whispered. You never told me. You never asked. In 20 years of marriage, you never once asked about my past, my ambitions, my dreams. You were content to believe I was exactly what I appear to be on the surface. I thought you were happy being normal. I was happy being with you. There's a difference. I gave up everything I'd built because I thought having a family with you was worth more than all the money and power in the world. I was wrong. In the other room, Dennis was facing his own reckoning. The three women he'd victimized had been joined by two men, Maria's son and Dr. Chen's brother, both of whom looked like they wanted to tear Dennis apart with their bare hands. Please, Dennis said, his usual confidence completely gone. I can make this right. I have money. I can pay back. With what money? Courtney interrupted. Your business accounts have been frozen. Your properties have been seized. Your assets have been redistributed to the people you stole from. Dennis stared at her in shock. That's impossible. You can't just. I can't, came Mitch's voice over the intercom. But I can. While you've been sitting there, my people have been dismantling your entire operation. Every illegal deal, every blackmail scheme, every piece of property you obtained through fraud, it's all being unwound. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. You see, Dennis, I've been watching you for years. Ever since you cheated my neighbor out of her home, I've been building a case against you. The affair with my wife just gave me the perfect opportunity to spring the trap. Dr. Chen leaned forward. The recordings you made of us, they've been turned over to the police, along with evidence of your blackmail schemes, your fraudulent business practices, and your pattern of sexual exploitation. Maria's son spoke for the first time, his voice low and dangerous. You destroyed my mother's life. Took away the only thing she had left to my father. For what? Money? Profit? I was just doing business. No. Mitch's voice came through the speakers again. You were being a predator, and predators need to face consequences. Chapter 9. Phoenix Rising. 1 week later, the story hit the national news. Suburban dad revealed as secret millionaire in elaborate revenge plot, read the headlines, but they didn't capture the full truth of what had happened. Dennis Townsend was in federal custody, facing charges for blackmail, fraud, and sexual exploitation. The evidence Mitch had gathered over the years, combined with the testimonies of his victims, painted a picture of a serial predator who had destroyed dozens of lives for profit and entertainment. Beverly was facing her own legal troubles. While adultery wasn't a crime, conspiracy to commit fraud was, and the evidence showed she'd been actively helping Dennis plan to steal from Mitch during their divorce proceedings. But the real story was about justice, and about what happened when someone pushed the wrong person too far. Mitch sat in his real office, not the modest cubicle where Mitch Sparks had pretended to work, but the top floor of a glass tower overlooking the city. The walls were lined with awards and photographs, documenting a career most people could only dream of. Katie sat across from him, looking small in the enormous leather chair. She'd chosen to come live with him rather than with Beverly's sister, saying she wanted to understand who her father really was. Do you regret it? She asked. Giving up all this to be normal? Mitch considered the question carefully. I regret trusting people who didn't deserve it. I regret believing that love was more important than respect. But I don't regret trying to build something real with your mother, even though it failed. What about Scott? This was the hardest question. Scott had chosen to stay with Beverly's sister, refusing to speak to Mitch after everything that had happened. He'd sent a letter saying he couldn't forgive what his father had done, regardless of what his mother had done first. Scott made his choice, Mitch said finally. He chose to side with the people who betrayed our family rather than the man who sacrificed everything for it. That's his decision to live with. But he's your son. He's Beverly's son. I may have provided the genetic material, but she shaped his values, his loyalty, his character. And those things matter more than blood. Kitty nodded thoughtfully. She was wise for her age, probably because she'd been forced to grow up fast in a house full of secrets and lies. So what happens now? Now, Mitch said, looking out at the city he'd once thought about ruling before he'd chosen love instead. I go back to being who I really am. No more pretending to be harmless. No more hiding my power. No more trusting people who haven't earned it. And me, you get to decide who you want to be. You can choose to be like your mother and brother. People who take loyalty for granted and think they're entitled to betray the people who love them. Or you can choose to be something better. That evening, Mitch attended a charity gala. Not as the humble insurance worker who occasionally volunteered, but as the mysterious benefactor who'd been anonymously funding half the charities in the city for the past 20 years. The recognition was surreal after so long in the shadows. Mitchell Briggs, the mayor said, shaking his hand, I have to say, when we found out you'd been behind so many of our community programs, we were amazed. You've been operating under our noses for decades. I prefer to work behind the scenes, Mitch replied. It's easier to get things done when people don't know who you are. And the situation with your family? I hope you know you have the city's full support. What that man did to those women, it's unconscionable. Justice was served. That's all that matters. Later, as he drove home to his real house, a modernist mansion in the hills that he'd owned for 15 years but never lived in, Mitch reflected on the cost of his choices. He'd gained back his power, his identity, his ability to shape the world around him. But he'd lost his family, or at least the illusion of family he'd tried to build. Beverly was facing trial. Scott wanted nothing to do with him. Only Katie remained, and she was still figuring out whether she could accept who he really was. His phone buzzed with a text from Ray. Townsend pled guilty to all charges. 15 to 25 years. The other women are finally getting justice. Mitch smiled grimly. Dennis Townsend would spend the next 2 decades learning what it meant to be powerless, to be at the mercy of people who didn't care about his comfort or his dignity. Beverly's trial was still pending, but with the evidence against her, she'd likely accept a plea deal that would leave her with a criminal record and enough debt to ensure she'd never live comfortably again. The phoenix had risen from the ashes of Mitch Sparks, but the flight had come at a cost. Power was lonely, justice was expensive, and trust, once broken,